Yeah. So if we talk about Armenia and the diaspora, we have 3 million people living in the country with the same size as Albania, approximately 30,000 square kilometers. We have 7 million people living in more than 100 countries. So our diaspora is very old, 1,500 years old. First communities has been established. Many waves were 800 years before, 500 years before, and definitely one of the major waves was after the genocide in 1915, 1921 in Turkey, in Ottoman Empire. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we also had this kind of influx, outflow of Armenians because of the war, the economic reasons, etc. So basically, out of 4 types of diaspora, we had all of them, which is a labor diaspora, victim diaspora, business diaspora, and imperial diaspora. And we have emerging and old communities. In terms of religion, we have all the branches, but we are mostly Christian Apostolic, but Eastern Orthodox Church. It's also similar to you because we have a separate branch of languages where we only speak Armenian. We have a separate alphabet in contrary to yours. So it also makes us kind of unique. And we are a part of the Armenian Apostolic Church, which is also a separate branch in the Christian churches. So 2 dialects, 2 orthographies, 3 traditional diasporan parties, a big number of only English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Turkish and Russian-speaking compatriots. This is something which you don't have, but hopefully you will avoid the situation. We have 30,000 diasporan organizations and networks all over the world, more than 1,000 schools, more than 200 churches in the diaspora from Singapore, starting from Singapore, and ending up with Amsterdam, Toronto, Montreal, Australia. 200 churches and 200 diasporan media, but still all of that infrastructure which has been developed cover less than 30% of our diaspora. So basically 70% of our diasporan Armenians are not engaged in diasporan life. Many of them has never visited Armenia before. So, and the Armenian identity is pretty complex because it consists of different elements. So if we look at the Armenian identity, it's quite stretched. So we talked a lot about trust. Trust is really a vital, a very important element. And in order to develop it, you have like 3 major elements, which are dark blue here, and I'll touch upon very briefly upon each of them. The first one is identity. The second is infrastructure, which means engagement infrastructure. The third is effective institutions. So if you develop 3 of them, it's already first step to develop this trust. By the way, trust is something which is very difficult to build in, but it's very easy to lose, especially in the relations with the diaspora, because the relations between state and diaspora are also very emotional and also a little bit rational, sometimes opposite, but usually it is that way. But also there are 3 other components, but resources, shared vision, and outreach. And basically you can become successful with your diaspora if you follow the following 3 major things. The first is listening skills. With the diaspora, you mostly need to listen. That's the most important thing for the governments, and most governments don't get it. The second is engagement. So you need to provide different ways for their engagement and engage them in the process of design of your programs, strategies. Even if you create a brilliant program and you just introduce diaspora, you'll fail. So you need to engage them as soon as possible, so to make them the owner of the process. And third is delegation of power. This is the most difficult for local governments. You need to share political and economic power, not to make an imitation, but just do it. And then you'll get full and meaningful engagement by the diasporas. The next one is the identity. Identity is something, the problems which we are facing now is something which you might be facing in 50 years' time, hopefully not, but also the benefits you might get, those which we have now. But Armenian identity is based on different elements, and this is quite, I think, it's not unique, it's common for many nations. So it's religion, language, culture, family values. Some people think that being just successful in Armenian somewhere else is enough, so it's a network nation concept. But also history, heritage, including the genocide trauma which we had, and for many Armenians abroad, it's a very substantial and core part of the element of the identity. And basically what we have in the diaspora, which becomes the reason for assimilation now, is that most of the Armenian diasporan members, diasporans, have 2, 3, 4 elements outside, but then they don't have national state as a core. So you have a solar system either with a weak sun or without a sun. and it creates a problem. They cannot develop it from scratch because many of them has left Armenia or historical Armenia before independent Armenia has been established. But the government definitely should be working on this, and also not the government, but also the diasporan leaders. And some of them will be standing together with me today, and it's a pleasure for me to talk and to listen to them. But also, it's very important to how you practice your identity. You can practice your identity on the family level, which usually takes place, but the most interesting and challenging is to take practicing of your identity to the community and society level and to the nation and state level. This doesn't happen at once, so you need to develop it together with the diaspora, and it's quite difficult and challenging conversation that you need to go through. If we look about diaspora and repatriates' impact in Armenia, it's huge. The number of people who return to the country is limited, but their impact, they are pioneering in most of the sectors. It's IT, winery, tourism, education, healthcare, connection with the other countries. So it's very important to inspire people to showcase and actually to develop effective relations between diaspora and the country. So if we look at diaspora's engagement ways, it's kind of a classification which has 3 levels of engagement, and each level has 3 elements. So if we measure it by impact and risk, so the lowest 3 are charity, remittances, and tourism. So basically for the diasporan, the minimum risk, but also the minimum impact on the country's development. The second level is innovations and skills transfer, and you had a very interesting session on this today. Investments and export promotion, and participation and initiation of social and business initiatives. And the last 3, which are the top 3 level, are organization of repatriation, so physical move of compatriots to the country. It's participation of the diaspora in institutional development, including elections and political participation, which has been discussed just recently. And the third is lobbying and influencing, so using their leverage to increase the value and the ranking of your country outside. So what happens quite often is that the first 3 is the most easiest thing to do with the diaspora, but the governments usually are trying to target the top 3, right? And where there's a gap between what they do and what they are planning to get is where usually you have the confusion in conversation between diaspora and the state. And one more thing which comes from the diaspora. When I was living there, we established young professional organization in Moscow. So we could understand that for us it's very important to, even if people don't move to the country, to homeland, it's very important to see where the gaps are. And what we found out is that there are 3 major elements when you live outside. The first is ethnic and national identity, which you really need to open and show. And by the way, you can't preserve identity. You can develop only identity. If you preserve anything in the open world, it's just a matter of time when you get assimilated. So you need to think how do you introduce your culture in a right, attractive, interesting way to attract the young generation. So the second is integration, but integration in 2 senses. Integration into the society and country where you live in, but also integration in the world Armenian diaspora. So being an Armenian who live in Canada, you need to be a part of and be connected with Armenians living in Lebanon, Australia, Russia, Iran, and many other countries. So, and the third is professional development. So you need to identify in each of your communities what's missing. And basically the ideal thing is when your community members are somewhere in the middle, where they can combine all these 3 elements. You find the major gaps and you work on those gaps. If it's mostly about identity, concentrate on identity. If it's mostly about professional development, create them new opportunities. It doesn't matter if it's ethnic-oriented activity or not. If it's about integration, also try to work on integration. Because quite often what happens is that we lose the most talented people in the diaspora. It's because we are unable to create this infrastructure. We are unable to target specific things. So we have people who are not integrated and getting into the diaspora life, for example, and in diaspora organizations. At the same time, we have a lot of talented people who are not becoming a part of the diaspora life. And very quickly, 4 elements, because we will be talking about identity and connection with homeland. So I decided to showcase 2 programs which are top-down, so basically developed by the government, and 2 programs which has been developed bottom-up, basically by the diasporans or repatriates. The first 2 are Pan-Armenian Games, which Armenia is organizing since 1999. The last one was 4 years ago. We had 4,300 athletes from 172 cities coming to Yerevan and exercising 10 type of sport disciplines with each other. It's a huge event. So basically a lot of people come. It's a huge opportunity for them to reconnect with homeland or have a connection with homeland, and for locals also to meet them. And the second is our Return program, which is similar to Original, but for a younger generation, 13 to 18 years old. We bring 1,000 kids to learn the culture, do sightseeing and language per year. They come and visit Armenia during the summer for 2 weeks. And the second two, which were created by people, actually by repatriates, the first is the Yerevan half marathon, which became Yerevan Marathon. So my friends from Moscow, they were participating in a marathon, internationally recognized marathon, and they thought, why shouldn't we have the same in Yerevan? Why shouldn't we create an opportunity for Armenians to come and run in Yerevan, but also bring their friends? And you were talking about image challenges related to Kosovo. I think this is a great example where you can actually promote these type of things, and it will give you an opportunity also to introduce Kosovo to people who are friends of Albanians from Kosovo who live worldwide, especially in Europe. And the second is a street workout Armenian movement, which is basically promoting modern sports premises and type of exercises in different regions. Again, this is a completely bottom-up thing which has been developed by just a group of enthusiasts. And now more than 10,000 kids all over the country are able to use those facilities, and this program is rapidly developing. I'm not planning to introduce other programs in other sectors because there are many, but we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to talk, and we'll be more than happy to answer the questions after my colleagues also introduce themselves.
Ka dikush të pyetje për zotin Vartan? Vartan, just a moment. No, but let's do it. Let's do it now. Let's do it.
I'll ask the question in English. Don't worry. Okay. My question is not long time ago. I have seen a document which is made by a kind of diaspora committee of Armenian, which is the strategy of the Armenian nation, let's say, the diaspora. And so how this one is created, or how this organization has taken this kind of power, because it was a huge and beautiful organization, what I saw, actually. It's like, because I was looking for our nation, as I say, Albanian nation, whatever, in the region and in diaspora.
Right. We had 7 big Pan-Armenian forums, which were held starting from 1999. They were a little bit more kind of a bureaucratic rather than... but in any case, most of the organizations, especially traditional ones, were introduced, and common vision has been developed, common strategy has been produced, major programs has been. So maybe you saw one of those documents, but as I mentioned, so we had the Ministry of Diaspora starting 2008. Now we have High Commissioner's Office on Diaspora Affairs, which is again the public institution. But from my point of view, it should be a set of organizations. One organization cannot cover relations with the diaspora. So the best thing to achieve, and I had a slide, but decided to skip it here, is to have a set of organizations which cover different aspects of relations. So if you want to deal with integration and repatriation, it can be a public institution, and it would be better if it's just a public institution. If it's about connections between diaspora and the state and some programs for the diaspora, the best format would be public-private partnership. Israelis are quite good in this, Irish are quite good in this, several other nations are quite good in this, but not many governments are actually brave enough to get to that model, because it means that it will be a completely apolitical structure, professional structure with the professional staff, with programs, with flexibility, which will allow it to be just above the politics and to plan things for 10, 15, 20, or 30 years. Because state-diaspora relations should not be directly correlated with any elections, from my point of view. But again, what you've seen is a good document, but it's still implemented by the government separately, and by the diaspora is taken for consideration at the moment. Have I answered your question?
Hey, Vartan. Such a pleasure to have you here. It was a really amazing presentation. I'm sure it's going to take us some time to absorb all the info and then start with some implementation later on. My question is, what is your message to Germin as an organization, since you have a lot of experience? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say that I really like what you do. I like the energy, and it's very close to what Repat Armenia is doing in terms of being a completely bottom-up and grassroots organization with a lot of engagement and professionalism in it. I would strongly recommend you to prioritize things. That's number one. The second, to expand. Don't try to cover everything. I understand that it's something which you want as well as we want, right? But dreaming big, you need to go step by step. So basically, try to focus on things which are easy to achieve, but also bring sustainable results. In terms of bottom-up strategies, going to top-down things, one of the biggest challenges is scalability and sustainability. So hopefully, you will be able to scale up those initiatives which you implement. And that's why I'm envious about what Israel is doing, for example, because if we're talking about Birthright, it's about bringing 50,000 people, right? If we're talking about Birthright Armenia, which is a different program, but nevertheless, we're talking about 300 people. So the scale is different. But in general, if you want to change the culture, you need to create a precedent, then to scale it up, and to achieve the critical mass so that it changes the culture and becomes a new norm of behavior, formal or informal. So I would strongly recommend you to concentrate on those things, actually. Prioritizing things, scaling them up, and then trying to find new partners in order to get into new spheres.
Just a short question. I have seen in different metropoles I have visited elementary and secondary schools fully completed on didactic material or on ambience. I need to know that are financed from the state of Armenia or self-financed.
Okay. So it's about schools in the diaspora, right? Yes. Okay. Look, the government of Armenia provides training of professionals from the diaspora. So basically, teachers from the diaspora come for special training courses in Armenia. I can't say that the quality is perfect, but it's okay. It's very important to teach Armenian or Albanian as a foreign language. It's a completely different approach, and this is how it should be actually addressed when you're trying to teach diasporans. Also, it's very important to develop modules where diasporans can learn the language, culture, dances in the country through private operators. I think it would be the best. That's my personal point of view. So in terms of supporting schools in some of the regions, Armenian government do provide support, for example, in Georgia, which is a little bit sensitive, and we need to support those communities next to Armenia. But in general, the funding mostly provided by the diasporan institutions, such as Armenian General Benevolent Union. We have a lot of vertically integrated old structures which have their own schools, their own assets. If you go to Beirut, if you go to Tehran, if you go to Singapore, in 3 cities in India, you will find Armenian churches, Armenian schools. In some cases, almost no Armenians, but still the infrastructure is there, right? So, but what is not less important and interesting, taking into consideration that your diaspora will also be much more diverse in terms of the number of cities they are living in, is using online platforms. We have Armenian Virtual College, AVC, /agbu.org, if you look at it. So we teach in 7 languages. We have 2 dialects of Armenian. 2 dialects of Armenian, Russian, English, French, Spanish, and Turkish. This college provides education. So it's about Armenian language, learning the language, culture, but also learning maths, studying music, and a couple of other subjects online. That's what I would strongly recommend you to explore and try to take the best of it, including materials. So 35,000 people learned Armenian and all of those subjects through this platform worldwide, including non-Armenians, by the way. Some of non-Armenians also apply. And also multimedia materials are important. And what is not less important, teachers are sitting in Armenia. So teachers which are teaching kids in Australia or Argentina or USA or Russia are sitting in Armenia and providing that service to the diasporas.